You can use that. I'll grab it from you.
Sure. Hello, everyone. So first, I'd like to bring the panel up to the stage. If we could have Bill Benton come up. Bill Benton is a course director with the Film Masters, Film Production Master of Fine Arts degree. He's also a re-recording mixer, an Academy member, and an Academy Award-winning sound mixer. Thank you, sir. Right there. Next up, Frank Scheuring, owner of Capital Post. He's a re-recording mixer, sound editor, one of our biggest brain trust on television specifications. And last but not least, if we can have Rick Viers come up to the stage, our 2014 Hall of Fame inductee. And then I'm going to hand this mic off and we'll get going.
Is this live?
It is.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, so when they approached us with the idea of this panel about don't skip on your soundtrack, I wanted to set some guidelines right away. By no means are we going to tell you, as much as Frank will interject since he's an owner of a company, we're not telling you to spend all of your money on sound and ignore everything else. Well, what I really want to focus on is to just not ignore sound when you're considering all of the facets of filmmaking. And the first question that I want to bring up to the panel is, I know we stress pre-production as being vital for the success of any project, but if we're thinking about not skimping on sound, where are areas that you think are the most important when you consider pre-production? We'll start with you, Rick.
Well, when it comes to pre-production, you're talking about location scouting, I'm assuming is what, yeah. The locations that you guys choose to shoot your sound in, well, that's going to definitely affect the quality of dialogue that you're capturing. So whenever possible, go to the location before you, during the scout to determine whether or not it's going to be useful for your soundtrack or I guess adverse to your soundtrack. And go there during the same time of day that you're going to be shooting. If you're going to shoot at night, you need to go there during the night because traffic might be different. There might be, if there could be a nearby train or traffic or any other things that you need to be aware of. So make sure you go to the location and listen. Be dead quiet. Spend a few minutes there. Determine if there's a lot of slap or bounce to the room. See if you need to bring sound blankets to quiet it down. Find out if there's air conditioning units that need to be turned off. Figure out how to turn them off, or if they're able to be turned off. And then there are times when I've done location scouts where I've told the director, I'm like, look, man, we really need to think about, doing another location. And sometimes they're like, well, this is the location I want. And then the quickest way out of that is to say, well, you got budget for ADR, right? Well, maybe we should look at another location, but that's one of those things where it's like, look, you can shoot wherever you want, but your soundtrack's going to suffer if you're not picking, a good location to shoot in.
So you bring up a good point with ADR, and I don't think we realize how much ADR can cost. And Bill, I know you've got a wide range of experience on Hollywood films where they've had to bring the actors back. And could you speak to a little bit about the costs involved if we don't get it right in production, bringing them back in?
Sure. Well, a couple things to remember about ADR is most of the time when you need ADR, now you're many times weeks, months, or maybe even a year down the line from when you shot it, depending on your production. So most of the time the actors have moved on. They're on another project. Most of the time they don't want to come back. And most of the time they'll listen to the production track that you've told them is completely messed up and they'll go, sounds great to me. What do I need to come back for? So ADR is, it's one of those things that you're already fighting an uphill battle. The second problem with it is many actors, when they're in their costume and they're on their set and they're interacting with another actor, they're in that moment and in that mode. Now you're bringing them back in their Bermuda shorts and say, remember you were on a horse, you had a coat of mail on, and you're fighting this bad guy, and now you're in a little cubicle, and I need you to, reperform that. So some people are great at doing it, other people are horrible at it. So, the bottom line is if you can get it on production and get it good, you're going to be way ahead of the game. ADR is sometimes a useful tool as far as additional storytelling, but to be on a set and go, hey, don't worry, we'll get it later, that's always a bad way to think. So production sound is going to be your gold. ADR is a fallback option, and it's expensive too.
So, Frank, thinking about pre-production, I know you've done a lot of documentaries, and the hard part with documentaries is it might not even be possible to get that person back, and a lot of times they're going in to capture this one time and one time only under unknown conditions. So if you were able to plead to future filmmakers and or documentary filmmakers as far as a wish list of things that you want, if you could have for every documentary that you do, what would those be?
We don't have enough time. First of all, I think it's not necessarily something I want, but what I want them to do, and that is to hire a professional sound person to be on location. Everybody has a brother or cousin or friend or whatever that can hold a microphone, but they need to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And if they don't, then it doesn't matter if the location is noisy and whatever. If they don't know what they're doing, then the mic isn't positioned right, or maybe they use a crappy mic or whatever, it totally affects everything. So it's not necessarily something I want, but I want them to hire a professional to do the sound. Of course, when it comes to ADR and when it comes to noise reduction, things like that, of course, it's more time for me, and hopefully I would get paid for that time, so that's good. Mm-hmm. But I'd rather not.
Right.
I'd rather them spend that money on the location sound guy.
So as we move into, into production, but mainly into post, as it starts coming into post, we're no longer, in a video editing suite anymore. We're on a laptop. There's not one video application or standard that we're at. There's many. When you jump onto a project, whether it's an independent film, a TV show, and I'm going to ask all of you guys this question. When you jump onto a project, how much does the video editing platform that they began the show dictate the success or hardship that you're going to go into when you start, your process? Rick, why don't you start us off?
The independent films that I work on, typically they just give me a rendered version of the film. And then from there, I just drag it on my timeline, and I'm off to the races. So it doesn't really make any difference to me. Obviously, if there's any changes and whatnot, I just drag in the new cut onto the timeline and then adjust accordingly. Mm-hmm. But typically, it doesn't really matter. I mean, the world was different, 10 years ago. But I think it's gonna get smaller and smaller. It's gonna get easier and easier, and it's gonna get more and more accessible. And I think there's gonna be a point, I think, in the industry, maybe 10 years, maybe sooner than that, where it's really not going to matter. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would say, for me, it's whether I'm given what I need. Okay, so it doesn't matter what editing platform you're using. If you can give me a QuickTime, whatever, but it's the AAF files or OMF files that I need, and it's not necessarily what platform you're using. It's does the person who's using it know what they're doing mm-hmm. to properly create the OMF or AAF files to come to me so that I have handles and and I have what I need and it's organized. So it doesn't really matter to me what Final Cut or Adobe or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. Mm-hmm. But I mean, overall, I think Avid is the rock as far as video editing is concerned. But
yeah, and a lot of it is just has to do with consistency and communication. When you're doing something on your own, being consistent with your platforms and your workflow, And then especially if you're collaborating with people, you know, where if you're, you know, cutting on one thing and somebody else is doing some work for you on another system, and a third person is doing work, you know, instead of just shipping it off and say, hey man, can you take care of this? And hey, can you take care of this? Just make sure everybody's kind of on the same page and working in a you know, similar venue. So when you bring it all to one venue, everybody's on the same page.
We talked a little bit just now about organization. You know, Rick, if you have, do you have the chance when you're working with your directors or producers, do you have the chance in the beginning of the project to kind of set the guidelines of, like, if you're going to send me the video, it's going to be, you know, to these specifications and the audio is going to come out like this, or do they just hand it to you and say, take it from here?
Yeah, I mean, typically, well, it happens many ways. Sometimes someone will come to me and say the project, you know, the project is finished. We need you to work on it, and they just dump it in my lap, and I have no say, and I just got to take, you know, what they give me. Sometimes they'll approach me at the beginning of the project and say, look, this is what we'd like to do. Typically, what I do is I'm like, let's run a test right off the bat. Let's just make sure that we're going to be able to interface properly, and then from there, you kind of like, okay, this is what I need. Please give it to me this way. And they never really give it to you that way. There's always a problem. But, you know, you just kind of roll with the punches. But in general, it's, again, like what Bill was saying, it's all communication. Yeah.
Yeah, it's you know, it's a real collaborative process, and different people that you work with, you know, some people that you work with, they want to be hands-on. I want to micromanage everything. I want to see every inch of every piece of picture you cut, every piece of sound you pull in. Other people are going to be like, here's this, create something. So each project's different, and generally, you know, when you have clients that you've worked with before, and they know that you guys are talking the same language, then you go, hey, Frank, you know, he's done 3 projects for me, hit it out of the park every time. I can start making the deal for my next deal, give this to Frank, and I know I'm gonna walk in and see, instead of me sitting there for 2 weeks, going through every inch of this thing with him, I know I'm going to give it to him, and not only is it going to be great, he may bring a whole new perspective that I hadn't even thought of. So it's different with each project.
Yeah, most of the time when I get something or our facility gets something, we had no idea about anything until the point where we were delivered the files, you know? So we are not really usually involved in pre-production or production, but I would love to be, you know, and in organizing and stuff like that. Sure, we have specs for video files and OMF files and whatever, and I say, okay, I'd like it organized this way, but like Rick said, it doesn't ever happen that way. You know, something is wrong, which it's just the way it is, and you just go with it. But, you know, organization is the most important part of the whole thing anyway. And so you know, if you're editing, by the way, if you're a video editor and you're cutting sound and it's going to post, don't mix your tracks up, please. Keep dialogue here and sound effects here, not checkerboarding on one track.
Now, but I mean, what is, I mean, what I'm going to ask seems obvious, but I want you to think about it this way. What is the incentive for the filmmaker to do that? Mainly, or the producer, what is the cost savings for, I'm going to make sure that in picture editorial that all my tracks are organized, that I've had this open line of communication with the facility from day one. You know, is there, you know, a monetary savings that they would see at the end of it, Rick?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really simple. It's going to get done. Do you want to do it? Or do you want to pay me to do it? But either way, it has to get done. Yeah.
The way I look at it is this. The assistant editor or whoever is loading the stuff in to be cut, they're already placing the stuff on a track.
Sure.
So why not spend that exact same amount of time and put it on the proper track? Because, you know, a typical hour-long original that we would do, I can spend anywhere from 4 to 8 hours just reorganizing tracks because it's so messed up. Well, that's a day or a half day that is coming right out of the whatever the budget is.
And yeah, it's just a matter of good habits. And even when you're working on your own project on a laptop, if you just start dumping tracks in there and you got dialogue here and sound effects here and music here, you know, before you know it, all of a sudden you've got a boatload of goodies in there. And, you know, if all of a sudden you're going, and I remember putting that, you know, that hammer hit in there somewhere, and it's just killing me. Every time it goes by, it's like bam, bam, bam. If you go, I know it's on the sound effects, then you've narrowed your search turf quite a bit, you know. But if you're looking at audio files, you're looking, there's little blips and blops all over your screen. Oh, that looks like a hammer. Oh, that was an explosion. Oh, that looks like a hammer. No, that was a bass note. Oh, that looks like a hammer. No, that was that girl going, ah! So, you know.
I want to watch that movie. Sounds pretty exciting.
Come on, that's happened to you before.
Oh, yeah.
Not the girl part.
So now, if we're, you know, when we're looking at locations, you talked about listening to the location and listening at the time that you're thinking that you're going to be shooting. You know, we could add to that, maybe check if there's going to be construction around there, you know, because that's the last thing you would want. You move in to start setting up day one of, and they're remodeling the next building. That's going to happen for the next 3 weeks. But when we talk about when we're in a sound stage, a little bit more of a controlled environment, but yet we're building the set. You know, I'd love to hear like some wish list items from the group. We'll start this case with you, Bill, first. If you're building a set, what are things that you want them to be considering as far as the soundtrack?
Basically, you know, sometimes you're building a set and people aren't thinking of like, okay, what all's going to end up going in here? You know, you're building a set and you're thinking, okay, you know, I want my couch here and I want my table here and I want my lamp here. Let's see, you know, we're going to put a couple actors in there. That's going to look great. And they don't think about, well, where's the sound guy going to be? You know, where's the camera going to be? As far as different surfaces that you know, that may be reflective in there when you're recording. If you've got you know, electronic things that need to come on and off, are those things that can be turned on, can be turned off? It's amazing, you know, when you our brains are trained to just kind of like hear what we see, and I always encourage people to like listen to your world in 7.1. It's like right now there's this fan going behind me going gangbusters. If we were recording this session, that would be like on our soundtrack big time. I'm looking at you guys and I'm concentrating on you. I don't hear that unless I think about it. But it's there and it's going to be there all the time. So really, you know, concentrate on your environment and listen to it. And, you know, as far as the set goes, yeah, it's like not only take into consideration what's in the set of what you're looking at, but what's on the other side of the wall too, that you don't see.
You know, I'm thinking about this right now, and we have a mixer here now that's probably wishing that we were all really close.
I just want to point out I have my mic pulled close
So
to me.
We'll bring
I was
the back.
getting ready to
Sorry,
start booming
See-
Frank.
Sorry.
We
Well, I don't like my voice.
we're thinking about it. We don't have to cut this later, so we'll just sit back and
Just
relax.
chill.
Yeah.
You know, a good thing to do though when you are checking out the location is to listen with without your headphones, and then close your eyes. That'll help you focus on your ears, and then listen with your headphones on because the microphones pick up things that we don't even really pay attention to, but kind of focuses your attention on what the mic is hearing. And sometimes you'll pick up low rumble or room noise or stuff that you wouldn't normally kind of notice. Because once you walk into a room, it only takes you but a few, you know, sometimes a minute or less before you're used to the reflections. So your brain goes, okay, we're in this environment, and then it just kind of tunes that stuff out, and you get used to it. But then you listen to it through the mic, and you're like, oh my gosh, this place has got a lot of slap to it. Or, you know, again, room noise, fans, all those sorts of things. Or distant traffic, things happening in the next room or the next building over that you wouldn't normally notice with your ears. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I do whether it's on a soundstage or especially with sound stages, because if the walls aren't treated, the first thing is just clap. You know, I'm not going to do it in front of the microphone, but I've done that in a number of places, and not only is it echo, but if you have parallel walls, if you have like, you know, that almost like combing effect that happens with it. But I remember we were on a film that we're doing Foley, and Foley was being done in this almost old retrofitted TV soundstage. And the first thing I did is I walked in the room, and the audio engineer was like, "Oh, don't do that." I was like, what do you mean don't do that? We're recording Foley in here. At some point, it's going to be louder than just a footstep or something, and I want to know what it's going to do to the sound. But what it did is it started a discussion, and we had to bring in blankets and things that they probably wouldn't have done. And that would have been something that I only would have noticed if I pushed up the fader on the footsteps and just heard this kind of reflection or combing filtering on it. That would have just been like, oh, now this isn't usable. But, you know, you brought up a good point, Bill, as far as where is sound going to be and where is camera going to be. You know, I read that on the show House of Cards that they'll actually paint out the boom pole as a vis effect because they thought about, like, we need to put this mic here, and that means it just needs to be painted out, and they have the budget to do that. But when you think about blocking and you think about working with the director of photography, what are some advice that you have as far as best case and best practices that could help the boom op get in where they need to get without, you know, as less as possible interacting with what they're shooting?
In my experience, you don't really get much of a say. You'd say, hey, you know, it'd be great if we, and the guy looks and goes, uh-huh, and they just like, go stand over by your cart until we're done lighting. And so, I mean, that's just been my experience. So it's kind of like you got to go in after the fact. I mean, there's tricks, you know, you got to work with what you got. So if you got to plan a mic or mics plural, you know, you do that. Yeah, I mean, that's typically been my experience. Yeah.
Yeah, in general, I don't have a whole lot of experience on production, but the little I do it's been, you're either running behind, sound man usually is kind of the last man on the totem pole, and that's one of the problems when you're on a shoot is there's so much visual concentration, you know, and direction as far as actors go, that sound is kind of like the last afterthought of, and that's why Frank touched on earlier about getting a good sound crew. It's so important, and you know, having a director that respects that, because I can tell you from my post-production experience, almost every single production comes in and the director goes, wow, I didn't hear that on the set, I wish I would have got that, you know, what happened, you know, it sounded perfect when we were shooting it, and there's all these things that nobody hears until they're in post-production. So, you know, if you are a director, get yourself a good sound crew and listen to them too, you know. Like Rick just said, it's, you know, 90% of the time, you know, you're trying to say, hey, how about if I get in here? And they're like, yeah, whatever, we're doing the lights, we're doing this, we're busy. We'll talk to you, small fry, later. Yeah, getting in there and getting a, you know, people that think about sound, because when you get into post, you know, it's like 50% of your storytelling is going on. If you can't hear the actors, what they're saying with the great acting job you got them to do, and you can't understand the dialogue, then you're back to the ADR question.
Mm-hmm. What wish would you have with actors in the way they do performances? I mean, Frank, for someone who mixes a lot of dialogue, I mean, what are you always wishing when, you know, I hope the actor, before they even open their mouth, like, I hope it's this, I hope it's this, I hope it's this. What's going through?
Well, I mean, really the performance is the most important part. It doesn't really matter what I would want. If the director's not getting what they want, then it's not going to fly, you know. But I would say, having said that, I would say that attempting to try to keep a consistent level of your voice throughout a scene would be awesome. Rather than, you know, unless the story calls for loud and whispered, whatever, then obviously the sound crew then should be taking that into account and, you know, doing multiple tracks with different levels, you know, to capture both. But that's really the only thing, you know, they need to please the director, not me.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's been times when I'll hear a line and I'll be like, man, it'd be great if we could get that a little bit louder. And sometimes the director's cool, like, okay, yeah, well, let's go ahead and roll again. And other times they'll be like, well, that's kind of the performance that we need. Let's just leave it. So you really don't. You can ask for it. It doesn't mean you're going to get it, but you can ask for it. But typically, that's like he said, it's a director's call. That's a performance issue, and that's kind of not my department, you know.
No, it's interesting. I mean, you know, not to discount anything that you're saying, but you say a lot of things that are true. That, you know, sound is at a low rung on the totem pole, and that there's a lot of things that, well, we won't worry about that. But what we have at our disposal here, while sitting in this room, and watching us online, is the future of filmmakers. So if we want to turn that frown upside down, what do we? Let's talk about what we want the future of sound to be. And you know, when we talk about, let's talk about set first, and then we'll talk about post-production. But starting from day one on the set, what?
Yeah, I mean, if we're taking that if we're taking it from that angle, then I think what it comes down to is this, and I've seen this many times, is that first-time directors almost always skimp on sound, almost always. It's the last thing they budget for, and you know, blah blah blah. And in fact, I just had somebody reached out to the chop shop last week. They're like, hey, we need to book a guy for 20 days of shooting, and we'll give him I think it was $100 a day or $150 a day. I'm like, guys, I've got gear that goes out for more than that. I'm like, probably not going to work. But the point is that they don't think about it.
Yeah.
Then they get into post and they're like, this is a great movie, but the sound sucks. And then they realize that if your sound sucks, your movie's going to suck. You know what I mean? That's part of the game. And so they rarely make that mistake twice. So it's usually the first-time directors that make all these mistakes. And then once they realize how much money it cost them in the long run, or how much it sacrificed their story in the long run, then the next time around, they're like, well, we should probably get a little bit more budget for sound. Those are the guys that when they get on set, they're like, okay, maybe we should move the key light so we can get in there and get a little closer with the boom, or, you know, maybe we should choose a different location. So it's just one of those things where, you know, if you're a first-time filmmaker, pay attention to the sound, listen to your sound guy. In my opinion, there are two people on your crew that are going to make or break your movie, and that's your camera guy, and that's your sound guy. You've got picture and you've got sound. Those two guys should be, I mean, for what it's worth, they should be the highest paid, and they should be the most knowledgeable guys on the entire crew. Everything else is very important. I don't mean to discount any of the other departments, because they all have very good reasons for why they're there. But the reality is that your camera guy is going to give you your image, and your sound guy is going to give you your sound. Those two things make up your story. And so it's very important that you listen to your sound guy, and that you listen, obviously, to your camera guy.
Yeah, you need to trust them. I mean, that's why you hired them.
Yeah.
Because they're good at what they do, hopefully. So why not listen to them, you know? I was on set for a day with the film I'm doing now several months back, and thankfully the director would literally just stand there and hold to roll, because the sound guy's like, no, I can still hear that plane, you know, and we'd just stand there and wait, thankfully, because he was trusting him. And now there's less, not none, there's less planes and boats and generators and all the other stuff in there.
If I could just interject again, sure. You know, I've seen over the last 20 years, I have seen a change in the value of sound on set. I will say that. When I first started out, sound was absolutely the afterthought. Hey, hang on, I need to hold for a plane. They just go, and they would keep rolling. And then we would get notes from the producer a week later, you know, hey, we can't cut this together, there's a plane in the background. I'm like, look at your log, and it'll say, you know, I'll put in the notes, director wouldn't hold for plane. I had to cover my butt, so to speak. But, you know, I think filmmakers, honestly, filmmakers are getting more savvy. You know, there's a lot of one-man bands, guys that are out there shooting their own film for the first time. They're the camera guy and the sound guy, and they're fully aware of the entire process from start to finish. So to be honest with you, I think the next generation of filmmakers, they're going to have it nailed down. I really do, because they know the process start to finish. It used to be, you know, filmmaking was you were specialized in one field.
Yeah.
and you assembled a crew of people that were specialized in one field. I've been on so many independent film shoots, and I've seen so many independent film shoots where it's like everybody on there is a qualified filmmaker A to Z. The guy that was doing lighting, he owned his own DSLR. He probably owned his own sound package as well. And like everybody on the crew has got a better understanding of how all the other departments work together. So I think there's like a morphing of all the departments into like everybody on the crew itself is a qualified filmmaker. And I think that's going to change the way that independent films are made, for sure.
Do you have anything?
Yeah, no, I'll second that. I think that awareness of sound and film has gone from, when I first started working, I'd have these old guys say, back in the day, they gave the sound guy a chance, and be like, okay, Grandpa, whatever, But then I think it kind of went full circle, where it went, the sound guy didn't get a chance, and now I think audiences are becoming very savvy about sound. When they go to the movie theater, people now, and many people have a pretty rockin' sound system at home. So when they watch a DVD, they notice sound, and they notice when the sound is great and when it sucks. And one thing that Rick touched on, it's like, especially for all you guys here, being able to work on all these different projects, plug yourself into, different roles in each one that you work on, because the more knowledge you have of the overall filmmaking process, the more ahead of the game you're going to be. If you can be, the DP on something, and then be the sound guy on something, and then direct something, and, be the first AD on something, when you get to do your project and you go, I know what that guy does, and I know if he's doing it right. I know what that girl does, and she's rocking it, So just becoming a well-rounded filmmaker is, knowing all those different roles and what they do and how they're doing it.
So as you're building the soundtrack up, what are some of your aside from music, aside from score, what are your kind of go-to things that you think are just necessary to kind of get the soundtrack where it needs to be? If you're looking at, you have production sound, that's all you have, what are you first to grab to start putting into the movie?
As far as adding things in, I always start with ambience. I start the biggest and then narrow down. So that way, if you run out of time or budget, then at least you covered the big stuff, right? So it seems to me to be the most efficient way to work. So I start with ambience, and then move on to the really obvious stuff, and then get nitpicky, and then if there's time or if it was budgeted, do sound design elements, that are not, oh, that's a hammer, it's whatever.
We're back to the hammer, aren't we?
Yeah, I got to bring in the hammer.
Back to the hammer.
Or explosion, or a girl
Or
going.
the girl.
So
Do that
Rick,
well, huh?
what are your goals for the ambience as it relates to dialogue? What are you hoping to accomplish when you're building your ambiences?
Well, two things. The first thing is I want to have consistency in the dialogue track. So what I do first thing is I cut dialogue, and then I find out how much noise is back there that I need to mask or hide. So my background's, my approach is twofold. One, so I want to make sure that there's a consistent bed, and that anything that was in, any background or noise that was in the production track gets hidden or stays consistent. And the second thing is I need to tell the story.
Right.
So then I need to give, an ambience or, a background track that tells us location, time, and all those sorts of things. Yeah.
How about you, Bill?
Yeah, you can, give different locations, a signature and a feel. When you're building your soundtrack, one of the things that Rick just touched on is when you're, and this is going back to production, but when you're building your dialogue track and you're cutting in between this take and that take, and it was at 10 in the morning, and then it was at 2 in the afternoon, a lot of times you're going to have all these ambience things kind of bouncing around. So that's one of the things when you're on production and this fan is here, get your sound guy, while, while people are rehearsing, or get everybody to stay on the set and be quiet, and have them just go over and record a minute of this to have, so that you can, when you start building your tracks, you've got production sound without production in it, without production dialogue.
If I could just jump in on there, and a good trick to do is to leave the mic in the exact same location to get that background noise as you are when you're recording the dialogue. So for example, let's say we're shooting at 10 a.m. and we're going this direction. I'd like to get room tone at that direction, and then in the afternoon we break for lunch, come back, we're shooting this direction, because when I point the mic this way, that fan's going to sound different than when I point the mic this way. So yeah, you might get room tone from the beginning or the end of the day from one direction, but when you go to the other direction in post, it's going to sound differently. So make sure that you're using the same mic and that you're in the same location that you're recording the dialogue, because again, the goal is to match what was there underneath the dialogue.
Right.
Yeah, and when you're out on a location, if you're shooting by a busy street, go over and get traffic, get 2 minutes of that traffic, because some of that's going to be in your production track. And the more wild tracks you can get of just, stuff that was there when you were on the set is going to be a bonus.
I like to, if it's possible, I always ask for 5 seconds of silence before action, because that room tone is room tone that matters. It's in there. The other part is, as a director, is do you even need to say action? Could you just point to the actors?
Right.
I mean, I know it's like you're in front of the mirror, in film school, and you're teaching like action. Do I say more? Do I say it with more gumption? How do I do it? But when you're in a really reverberant room and you say action, the decay of that is going to last. And most of the actors that I worked with, they're ready. They're waiting. They want to hear the words. They want to start the scene. So you say action, and they're like, hello, or hee for the girl. Just keep that going in, or the hammer.
Hammer.
When that happens later, you get shh, of the end of action, overlapping the line of dialogue, and it's only when you come back later that you'd hear it. So if you got that 5 seconds of room tone, and you can point, which would give you a couple seconds, and it's quiet, now you have like the magic eraser of,
right.
There's a squeaky dolly track, go to that 5 seconds of room tone, because it's hard to do it after, because everybody's wanting to move. The grips want to move to the next setup, and lighting have to move. So if you tell everybody you have to wait for a minute, that's an eternity.
Yeah, and I would add to that, when cutting, even just give it a second or something. The actor finishes the line, cut. Like, well, crap. Now I don't have anywhere to go.
Yeah. So we talked about backgrounds. When we talk about Foley, what is the best way to get Foley into your movie? And if you had to do it extremely low budget or do it yourself Foley, what are some things that you can do? Even if you only had the production equipment to do it with, just to kind of capture some of that sound. Like, Foley's very important. It's very important for deliverables. In order for the film to be a success and sell, it has to be in different versions. So what are some tips that we can give our students on how to do it yourself with Foley?
Now, when you say production equipment, you mean talking about gathering it on location during the time of shooting, or in post?
Or if that's the only equipment that you have. You don't have a Foley studio, you still have the camera and the microphone and the sound recorder that you have on set.
Right.
Using those tools only, how could you get some?
Yeah, I mean, don't overthink the process. Yeah, it's great to go into a studio and have all the gear and have all the mics and have a soundproof room and all this kind of great stuff. But if you don't have it, you got to work with what you got. Okay, fine. It can be done. So it's just a matter of, from that standpoint, use whatever you got. If you got a Zoom recorder, start with a Zoom. If that's all you can get, at least you're getting something. I was talking with Mark Mangini. You know Mark, right? I was talking to him, and I visited him a few years ago, and we were chatting, and he was telling me, I forget the name of the movie. It was it was a big movie. And he's like, yeah, we were on the stage, and they, the mix stage, and they didn't have the sound of something happening. It was like a pen drop on a table. And he's like, And he's like in front of this like $1 million console. And he's like, yeah, I just grabbed my Zoom recorder and just, and then added that in and made it in the film. And it's like most people think, oh no, you've got to have a, $5,000 gold-plated microphone running through a main. No, you don't. You just need the sound, and just to make sure it doesn't clip and there's not a lot of hiss, and you can make it work. So, I always say, technique always trumps technology. Don't focus on the gear or the price of the gear. Just focus on how it sounds. If it sounds good, use it. Great. Who cares? So when it comes to Foley, focus on the main things. Anytime an actor grabs something, we need to hear that grab, whatever it is. If he's grabbing, if he's picking up a coffee cup, if he's, patting somebody on the, on the shoulder, if he's grabbing a hammer to hit a girl. But we
never established the hammer was hitting the.
We need to, yes.
You made that sound.
Just to hammer that thought home. No, but we need to hear those things. Footsteps, especially. We need to hear those types of things. And use wherever you can record it. Record it. If it's in a spare bedroom, so be it. Just get something, into your film. Obviously, yeah. Again, it's great if you can rent a studio or go to a stage and do it right. But if you can't, work with what you have and make it good. You'd be surprised what you can figure out when you're strapped for a budget. But that, like I've always said, filmmaking is two things, man. It's storytelling and creative problem solving. Yeah. And when you're on a film set, you've got to be creative and you got to figure out ways around the problem. You've got a sound problem. You've got holes in your soundtrack. Figure it out.
Yeah, it's and when it comes to Foley and creating stuff, being poor sound nerds that we were just backstage, and right before we came out, Rick was saying, oh yeah, I needed to get these insect sounds, and I taped these big pen tops to my hands, and I went, it worked great. And then he's like, yeah, I took a couple of pencils and some sand, and I did some crab footsteps. Yeah. So it's like, it doesn't have to be the real thing to get it. I can't tell you how many times on the stage, maybe the Foley department has done something, and the director goes, I hate that. And you go, dude, break out the mic, and you want a different punch? Grab Frank? No, you grab a cushion from the sofa and bam, hit that, and okay, now we'll EQ that down and put some reverb on it. I like that much better. So you can, you don't have to have a facility, a zillion props. You can make all kinds of different stuff work for different things.
Mm-hmm. And if you have access to it, go back to the original location. Mm-hmm. Especially if it's indoors and it has the reverb that the dialogue has, walk the same footsteps and then cut them in, and you'll be amazed at how much they match up, and then it's just beautiful. We just finished a film called Last Shift that should be coming out sometime this year, where it was all in one location. It was in this abandoned police station, and all of the sound effects were from a 4-day adventure of recording sounds. But and we gave all those sounds to the director, and whenever the director was editing the film together, if they needed a bang, it was a bang that happened at that location. And he bought it, and it worked with the dialogue, and it worked with everything, and it felt natural. And it gave the soundtrack something that it would have never had if it was a fake bang going through a fake reverb to try to get to the same result. We haven't talked about set decoration yet, or even props, but I did,
if I could real quick, I wanted to jump in on the Foley thing, because it's a great idea what he was saying, to record Foley on the same, especially if it's got a unique, character to the sound. Back in the day, the idea of doing Foley meant you had to have, you'd drag a monitor out. Nowadays, you can do it on your laptop or an iPad or even your phone. But if you, for whatever reason, don't have a cut of the film, or you don't have the ability to go out on location, you can still go out and do a Foley session without even having picture to sync with. Like, if I know I've got to do footsteps, I'm going to go out and I'm going to walk a bunch of times, and I'm going to give a bunch of single steps, different paces, different intensities, and you can just make like a little sound library, so to speak, of that location. Mm-hmm. There's door slams or door closes, close it a bunch of different times, different intensities, different speeds, and more than likely, that's going to be aces for the guy who's cutting it together. At least he's got something that came from that location versus trying to grab it from a library and then trying to, like you said, adverb to make it work.
Mm-hmm. No, and I would add to that, both of you said something. You said go back to the same location. I would say, why go back? Do it when you're there.
Sure.
The film that I'm doing right now, The Rangers, that's exactly what the sound crew did, because they were like, hey, is there anything you want me to get? And I said, yeah, anything you see when you're shooting, just do it. There's a scene they're pulling a wood cart, with like vegetables and stuff in it. when you're done doing that, record that cart on that, path. Because why not?
Right.
You're already there.
That follows the same, like what I was talking about, recording this fan or recording the traffic. Any kind of, cool sound effects. You may not even need it for that, but then you got it in your library. So down the road you go, forget the hammer, forget the girl screaming, I need a wood cart. Then you could go back and get that wood cart.
Yeah, and another thing I would point out for guys that are running boom, and I've seen a lot of amateur boom operators do this, make this mistake, is they'll follow someone. Let's say Frank's going to leave and go out the door, and he's talking as he goes to the door. So they'll follow him with the boom to get his dialogue. And the moment he's done with his dialogue, they'll just move the boom away, and then he'll exit the door. And it's like, well, great, we could have had a door sound for free. Follow the action, you know what I mean? Because you don't know what they're going to run into in post, and if maybe that sound works or whatever, if they need it. But follow through with the scene. Just because the dialogue is done doesn't mean the boom operator's job is done. Record as much stuff as you can, because at the end of the day, you're giving the sound team free tracks to work with. So be sure to follow all the way through.
With that in mind, what is your thoughts on MOS?
I don't think there's a reason for MOS. There's no reason. Even if, everybody's using DSLRs now, and they've got like camera mics just record something. If you can't do double system and you just got to use camera mic, get it. There is so much stuff that we can get for free that we could possibly use. There's no reason not to. It's free. You know what I mean? So just roll on it. It doesn't take that much longer. I've heard directors complain, well, I don't have time for us to sync up. It's like, Jiminy Christmas, dude. I just got to roll and go speed. It's like, takes an extra 2 or 3 seconds, and you could get something for free. Not to mention that sometimes it's helpful for the editor, because then the director can, even if there's not necessarily sound, they can actually talk their way through the scene, and the director's voice can be heard if he needs to denote something, on the take or whatever. So there's I don't know, I don't think there's really a reason for MOS. I call for MOS sometimes, like if I want to go get a sandwich. I'm like, yeah, let's do this one MOS. Well, I'll be on my phone Facebooking. No, but I discourage MOS. I don't think there's a reason for it anymore.
Yeah. It can be useful, even if I'm trying to cut in sounds and I want to make sure that it's synced perfectly with the shot.
Yeah.
Well, that sound is synced to it, so why record nothing? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, just because you record it doesn't mean you have to use it. But if you don't record it, then you got nothing to use. So just always shoot it if you can. Yeah.
Now, if you think, okay, so we've done our work in pre-production. We've hired a professional sound team to work on the day. And while we're on set, if we talk about props and set dressing, things that their actors are holding, let's find just like a list from all of you of why on earth did they give the actor this in the scene, and how that destroys any good hope of production sound working for the scene. We'll start with Frank, because he chuckled first.
You mean here, carry this big huge package that's rubbing against the lav mic?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, there's any number of things can cause problems with the sound, so you just got to take a second to think about it. If they're going to carry this big huge package that's going to rub against the lav, move the lav. Give the sound guy time to do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, who wants that?
Yeah. Most people that have been doing this for a while, like, the various departments like wardrobe, they're fully aware of the fact that lavs need to go on the actors. So a good wardrobe person they're not going to make the costume out of Mylar or something crazy that's going to crinkle and crackle and make all sorts of noise. But if you're working on on a shoot that everybody's new, or that department happens to be new, you got to communicate with them. Listen, let's try to avoid these fabrics. The idea is you want to try to keep the set as quietly as possible. I'm just, I don't know why, but this scene popped in my head. But we had a scene once we were shooting where they were drinking a beer or something, and as they were delivering the line, they had to throw the beer into the trash can. And it was important for him to be talking while he threw it. Usually I would say, hey, can we give it a beat, throw it, then deliver the line. But it was important for the scene for him to say, you're not going to do this anymore, and throw the beer down in the trash can. Well, it's a glass bottle, so it's going to make a clink sound. So we just threw sound blankets in there. And it worked. He would say the line, and he would throw the bottle into the trash can, and you didn't hear it land. And then, of course, in post, we'll go in and we'll make the, put in the sound. But that way we get clean dialogue and we're not forced to have to try to, combat that later.
Do you have any?
Great idea.
Yeah, I mean, there's just different tricks of stuff that you can do on production. Sometimes paper, you can just take, a spray bottle and just moisten it down a little bit so you can still turn, but it's not giving you the, type of thing. You can put a pad, if you've got a tablecloth, it's a wood table and somebody's going to slam something down, you can put a little pad under there, just little different things just to think about, when you got action happening on production, just try to give the sound a cursory glance.
I've done 3 feature films where an actor has had a plastic bag with one, it was with groceries, the other there was like clothing and then, like something else that they were carrying. For the entire scene they have this plastic bag and it's just why? I mean, it's the worst sound through the whole scene, and I was like, what if it was like a cloth or canvas bag? And they're like, say, that would have been awesome.
You can also have actors take their shoes off too if they're on a noisy surface, and you can't see their feet. Just have them take their shoes off so you're not getting that clompity kind of sound.
And all it really takes is someone on the set to say it, to say, hey, maybe we should have the actors take the shoes off, and someone to listen and say, okay, that's a good idea. Let's move through it. As we're wrapping up, before we start asking questions, what has in your mind, what hasn't been said? If you have just 30 seconds each, what do you want to say to the filmmakers here? To encourage them to not skimp, but actually let the soundtrack thrive.
I'll let you go first.
Why, thank you.
You're welcome. Give me a moment to think.
Great. I would say you need to learn about the other roles that are happening on set, in even pre-production, in production, and post. And not because you need to know how to do all of them, but because you need to be able to communicate with the people that are doing those jobs. So if you know a little bit about sound and whatever, maybe you've learned something here today, hopefully. Maybe you know the basics of, importing stuff into an edit system or exporting or whatever. At least you can talk to your editor, you can talk to your sound guy, you can talk to your lighting guy, whatever. That's, to me, because communication is going to be the most important part of the whole thing anyway. Because if you can't explain what you want, then they're not going to know what to give you. So that would be my 2 cents.
As far as building a soundtrack and stuff for your movie, sound is it's not a visual thing like, say, I want this to be orange. It's when you're talking about sound, it's a very subjective, a very conceptual thing. So especially if you have somebody working on sound for you, before they put in a day, a week, a month of sound work, and then you go listen to it and you go, that wasn't what I was thinking at all. Work with them as they're going along and say, this is the concept. We talked about doing ambience for a scene and creating a world. As they're starting to do something, go in and listen and review and be part of it, so that either one, you don't run out of time and money, and it's done and it is what it is. It's not what I wanted, but we can't go back and do it. Be collaborative and work well with others.
I think it's important to realize that sound will make your movie look better. And I think it's more true than people realize. Hands down, in my opinion, the single biggest downfall of independent films is the soundtrack. It makes it look unprofessional. And if you don't go to any 48-hour film challenge, go to any independent film festival, and you'll see. inconsistencies from shot to shot, background noise, missing room tone, all this sorts of things, it's jarring to the audience. Most audience members believe that the footsteps that they hear in the film track are recorded when they're recording the dialogue. They're into that world. And when they don't hear footsteps, they don't hear the door shut, or things aren't matching, it just kind of, whoa, what's wrong? Why isn't it working correctly? And it kind of makes your film look bad. So study film. If you want to be a filmmaker, understand the importance of sound, because it will make your movies better. It will help tell your story better, and it will certainly make your pictures look better.
I mean, my biggest goal is if you treat sound with the same respect of picture, you'll have a lot less disclaimers that you say before you start playing your movie. And if you've done this before, you know what I'm talking about. It's like, I want to show you my movie. The sound's a little bit rough. All the sound effects aren't in yet. Same could be said with visual effects. It's not color corrected yet. What we're hoping to accomplish is, I want to get you to the point where you say, here's my film. I hope you enjoy it. So I think now we would like to open it up to questions from you. So I know that there's, Katie has a microphone, so we can have the first question. That would be wonderful.
Hi, I'm going to be talking or asking a question about something that you really didn't speak on. But earlier you had talked about how a lot of people on the set are really well-rounded and are certified as filmmakers themselves. So in regards to a movie score or a composition, do you find a lot of your productions bringing in guys who just specialize on that, or who are doing different jobs and doing the score as well?
Generally, anybody that's going to score a film for you, that's kind of their gig, that's their deal. We just looked at some films today, and one of the guys, we said, oh man, that was a great piece of music, where'd you get it? And he said, I did it and I recorded it. And we went, dude, that's rocking. If you're, a great musician, or you have a DP that's a great musician, more power to them. But in general, I would say there's people that specialize in doing film composition or music for television, doing scoring. It's a whole different animal than making a record. It's becoming, a lot of crossbreeding going on. But as far as like what we were talking about being well on set, music is pretty much a post-production deal, unless you're shooting, an on-camera concert type situation or something like that. But pretty much all underscore music is all done in post-production after the shoot. Did that answer your?
We got
Cool.
a thumbs up. Other questions? Oh, we say a hand up. Katie's running with the microphone. There we go.
Don't mind, I wrote it down. Okay. As an indie filmmaker, would you seek to graduate to a major company, and if not, why?
As an indie filmmaker, would you seek to go to a major studio?
Become a major company? As how you have the big six, like Universal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
If you're starting.
Is that a distribution question? I'm not understanding.
No, I think she's. What you're saying is, would you want to stay small and independent, or
Yeah.
become big?
Yeah, and do all of that distribution,
Right.
all of that.
I've done quite a few independent films in the post-production supervising role, and I spend a lot of time with indie filmmakers. It's difficult to make a well-rounded quality film for an extremely low budget, but we're finding producers that are clever in the way that they're doing it, and they're finding a team of individuals that they're paying a decent enough wage to keep them with them from film to film to film, because we all know the filmmaker that wants everything for low to no money or deferred. Deferred means never, right? But there are producers now that are finding a method of doing it. And when we did this movie, Last Shift, the whole goal of we're shooting in one location, we're shooting for 10 days, we're doing this from this period to this period, made the film successful because it was thought out and planned that way. And it's a very different model than what would happen in the majors. So I think that you are going to see like a difference between those. And I think that for the small independent company, I think the goal is not to become the big six, but to do multiple productions throughout the year if you can, because there's success in numbers. You know, you're looking at a video on demand, video release game, and having multiple projects out there that people can go and experience. It's the sum of all of that kind of non-box office revenue, so to speak, that's going to help you move on to the next 3 or next 5 that you expect to do next year.
And let me just add one more thing on that. You know, it's when you're making your own independent film, you're in charge, you're doing what you want to do, your creative direction. The more you get other people involved, they're giving you some money, so maybe now you've got a facility and you've got a better camera, but they're going to want to put their 2 cents in. And then the grander you get, the more bedfellows you acquire, the more they're going to want to put their 2 cents in too.
You have a follow-up question?
Thank you. And that was a great point that you just made. You know, about major companies putting their 2 cents in, and kind of altering your own vision. Because I do see that in a lot of cinematic, box office movies today. Mm-hmm. They kind of stray away from the point of the story, or, the element that was created from the beginning. And that's why I had asked, how could we kind of get the indie films to, even if we have to stay low production or low budget, a lower budget, to have that vision and stay in that upper scale if it's possible. But,
Well, the number one thing is you got to have a good story.
Right.
So nothing's going to happen without that. So, I mean, my focus would be, if I were an independent filmmaker that wanted to succeed, number one goal is have a good story and tell it as well as I can. And then after that, distribution and things like that, distribution's changing every day. Yeah. Now, anyone in here can have their film distributed online by clicking a button, and it's available to everyone in the world. So, I would concentrate on the story.
And it's all about content, getting the content out there. I mean, if you think about it, this panel is going to live on YouTube. People will be able to find it. It's not going to go to network television. And people who are looking for content and the content that you're describing are finding it on video on demand solutions that give them the option to find that content. And the other part is social media marketing and branding. No one's going to find your vision unless you put it out there, and you take the steps to do that effectively, to where the right networks of people are aware of what you're releasing and when they can find it, when they can watch it. We have another question right up front.
Yep. Oh, question right here.
Oh, there you are.
Hello, I'm Nelson. Got the mic too close. Hello, I'm Nelson. I'm an RA. Thank you guys for being here. My question is a little specific, but you guys kind of the thought came to mind when you guys brought field recording specifically for documentaries. Is there a market for that, and how would I go about finding opportunities for that? I've been looking and researching, but it's kind of there's been some obstacles of trying to find opportunities for location sound for documentaries.
Where do you live? Here? And this you're looking here?
I'm from California, but I lived in California. I'm most likely will move back.
Well, I mean, Rick would probably know better than I would, but the number one thing, if a producer or somebody calls me and says, hey, I need a sound guy for this shoot, I'm not going to recommend somebody unless I know their work and I know that they're good. So the number one thing would be to learn as much as you can about it and get as good at it as you can, and then prove that and have a resume, you know, and references that you can say, here, you know, you contact this person, whatever. And if you're trustworthy and you show up on time and you do quality work, then the work will come.
Great. Thank you.
The other thing I would add is, you know, having the same director on your resume multiple times speaks volumes. The fact that someone went back
Yeah.
and used you again. And then for production, wherever there are tax incentives, that's, you know, because it's tied into hiring locals in that area. So being astute on, you know, this state is moving forward with a tax incentive. Maybe for the next 6 months, I'm going to base myself there and just kind of be a nomad, you know, move with it. Especially, that's how productions work. You know, post-production, they'll go to a facility because they like the facility. That facility might be close to their house. And in Los Angeles, there's so many post-production facilities. That's very much a factor. It's just like, this studio is backing my film, but I live closer to this studio, so I want to mix at this studio. And if you're big enough in the game, they're like, okay, you can mix over there. But with production, they're going to go for specific areas, and you just need to be there. There was a question up front, unless Katie.
I'm going to take one right over here.
You move so fast.
I know, I'm quick.
All right, this might be kind of a dumb question, but I was wondering, like, after you've gotten like some sounds, like say like footsteps or something like that, what would the like EQing process be like? Like, what would your goal be, like, as far as like taking things out or adding? Like, what are you trying to do when you're EQing the sounds?
Now, are you talking about when you're recording or after the?
After everything.
Yeah, and then the reason I bring that up is because I tell everybody don't do any EQ whatsoever when you're recording. I mean, low cuts, yeah, but sometimes. But in general, leave it to post. You don't color correct your film while you're shooting it, right? Why would you EQ while you're recording? So leave that for post until you're in an environment where you can make the right critical decisions on the right kind of monitors. But that said, in general, you want to kill the low end. For the most part, you want to clean up the mud at the very bottom. But there, in my opinion, you guys might have a different approach, but you know, there's really no right answer. Just make it sound good, make it fit into that world or fit into that scene. There's no like always have it at this setting and that kind of thing. You're gonna tweak it. After a while, you kind of get used to things. You're gonna kill a little bit of the highs, a little bit of the lows or whatever, and then live in the middle somewhere. But it really kind of depends on, you know, for at least for me, it depends on the scene. I don't always do the exact same settings every time. Yeah.
Yeah, each situation is unique, you know. So I know I have like certain things I like doing with music and certain things I like doing with Foley, but I would never go in and preset that before I listen to it. Mm-hmm. So it's, you know, each, you know, if you gave Foley as an example, if you're dealing with Foley that's, you know, one person walking across a concrete floor, that's different than somebody running through a field. So there's really no presets on anything, and each movie that you make and each scene that you mix, it's going to be, you know, how many backgrounds are in there, how many, you know, what kind of sound effects are in there, is there a score going on, and they're all interrelated frequency-wise. You know, different things speak out depending on the, you know, competition and what else is going on. So basically, there's no rules.
There's no rules. I like to think of it in a sense of like cooking or with food. Like you want to listen to everything together and see what stuff plays naturally. Having a preset EQ is like taking salt and putting it on food that you've never tasted yet. You know, you think it might be it needs salt because the last thing I need needs salt, but it could be a product that already has salt in it, and then you taste it, and you're like, well, now that's kind of baked in. So when we're mixing, a lot of times we do here's a top to bottom pass that's going to sound horrible. But as we do that, there are magical moments of like, well, that is really nice, and I don't want to touch that. The rest of it, yeah, I'm going to be on that all day. But that right there is really good. And the nice thing is when Bill and I mix, there's a lot of collaboration. And what I love about it is neither one of us are afraid of like, hey, do you think I'm taking too much low end out of that footstep? Do you think I should revisit that? And then they kind of, yeah, maybe. But there's at least, don't be afraid to ask. Like, hey, take a listen to that. Do you think the footsteps need to be beefier? No, I think they're good where they are. And then you just kind of move forward with it.
And to be completely opposite of what he just said, I put the salt on first. No, for real, like I do use presets as a starting point. And I take it in, I put it in, and take it out, and I listen to that do what I wanted it to do as a starting point.
Everybody's got to, like I said, there's no rules, there's
Yep.
no right way. And a lot of it is just experimentation and seeing what works for you and get your method.
My question was, basically, you're saying that sound is the heartbeat of film. So my thing is coming in as an independent, how would you, I guess, solidify yourself within the business coming in brand new? Because it's so important that people would probably pick, like you said, someone that's more professional. So someone coming out of school, how would they solidify themselves?
Independent films. 48-hour film challenges are a great way to get started. Excuse me. You got to start somewhere. You're not going to get hired right out of the gate. There's no two ways about it. You got to pay your dues, and the only way to pay your dues is to work on projects. So you got to find people that you're going to have a whole bunch of filmmakers that are out there that they're graduating and they're directors and they've got stories they want to tell, and hopefully they realize, hey man, sound's important. I got to find a good sound guy. Well, guess what they're going to do? They're not going to be able to go to the high-end guys. Then they can't afford it. So they're going to find guys that are eager like you. They're like, hey man, I want to cut my teeth on a good film. I want to do a good job. This is my goal. This is my passion. And you guys link up. Get involved in your film community. Go to the mixers. Go to the 48-hour film challenges. 48-hour film challenges are great on so many levels. Number one, it sharpens your skills. Because if you can do it in 48 hours and do a good job, you're in a good place. But it's a great way to meet people. You meet people on location. And for those 2 days, you're going to learn things from other people that maybe you didn't know, right? And then what happens? Then you have the screenings of all the films. And guess what? You're going to meet even more filmmakers, and you're going to be able to connect with even more people. And then you're going to have the awards. And then when you have the awards, you're going to meet even more people. So it's that networking thing. And then you're like, hey, man, I want to do sound. Here's my reel, or, here's how you can get a hold of me, and I'll start working on your project. And then everybody's going to go somewhere. Just because somebody's a beginner now, they're not going to be a beginner 5 years from now or 10 years from now. You get into a good relationship and it develops, and then you guys grow in your, careers, and you guys might work on larger and larger productions together. But that said, don't work for free.
Yeah.
Because you guys got to understand the power in numbers. There are way more people on this planet that want to do what you're doing, right? That are willing to do it for free. And if everybody does it for free, nobody gets paid. And it's fun when you get started to do things for free because, hey, look, I'm in the business. But if everybody's doing it for free, there is no business. And then 5 years down the road, when you want to get out of the apartment, you actually want to buy a house or you want to start a family, and you can't afford it, it's because everybody's doing it for free. Yeah. So there's value in what you offer. Don't discount that value. Don't work for free. Yeah.
And I would add to that, the networking, what he's talking about is, I cannot even begin to stress how important that is. You were asking how could someone fresh out of school, get work as a location sound person, and I can tell you that last year there was a guy who graduated from here. His name is Brent, and Brent called me up because we had met when I was on campus one time, and he called me up and said, "Hey man, I'm trying to get this gig, but I don't have any gear," and the pay was really low, and so he couldn't afford to rent gear. So I knew him, we had met, we had talked, whatever, and I let him borrow the gear, you know, and then he got that gig, and then he got another one from that same person, you know, and then he's slowly making a little bit more, and he's able to rent gear when he needs it, you know, and he's moving up. But you got to start somewhere, and the networking side of that can help you in so many ways. Just like that, if he hadn't gone out of his way to come talk to me, you know, and whatever, I wouldn't have known him, and then he wouldn't have been to call me and go, hey, can I borrow that stuff? You know, can you help me out?
I would think most productions kind of start hiring where they stand. So they're based in this area, and they'll start looking out in the circle. It's like, okay, we need someone to run sound. Does anyone know anything? Anyone that can help? And we find that person. Let's interview. If we like that person, then they're good, and they're going to start within that ring. So that's why I was saying, if they're doing these productions in relying on a tax incentive, be in those areas that have the tax incentive, you have the most concentration of productions that you can be a part of because you are in that area. When it comes to like studio work, the important thing is you can always ask existing facilities if you could four-wall one of their rooms to do your project. I've seen so many business plans from students that say we want to start a studio and we're going to renovate the space and we're going to buy this equipment. You really don't need to do that. What you really need to do is call a studio and say, hey, I've got show X that's going to be here for 4 weeks and I need to be able to mix in this room. How much is it for your space at that day? You know, Frank might have multiple rooms and he's doing a show in his main room, but this room isn't working right now. If you're working in this room, then that benefits the studio space and paying the bills and power and stuff like that. So now you're an ally. He's not going to try to take your client. You're not going to try to take their client. And now you have a place. And you're like, I am based now at Capitol Post. I'm going to be at Capitol Post for a while. Then I'm going to go out to LA and I might be at another facility for a while. But there's so many independent facilities out there that if you just call and say, hey, I've got a client that wants the services. I just need a place to mix it. Do you have a room that's available? That might happen. And now you don't have to buy anything that's going to be obsolete in 6 months, that you're going to have to upgrade to a new version of the software. You just kind of move from facility to facility to facility. Happens a lot in the music industry. Doesn't happen enough, I think, in post-production, other than the majors. They'll move back and forth all the time. I think indies need to do that as well.
All right, we have our last question over here in the back.
My question has to deal with mixing lavs and booms. It's not something I have too much experience with, but maybe it'll be an easy answer. Let's say for a scene of dialogue, you're using the lavs, but then there's one point where there's a ruffle. Is that a point where you mix the boom in, or is it too different of a sound to blend together? I don't know if you blend those together or if you use just one throughout the whole take. If there's any specific experience you have in that situation.
Now, when you say mix, you're talking about mixing on set?
No, like
Or
in
you're talking about
post.
in post. In post, it's going to be a matter of what works. If you can steal it because you've got clothing rustle or something like that from the lav, and you can steal it from the boom. Yes, absolutely. Sometimes you got to get creative. Sometimes you have to find the consonant from another word spoken earlier in the dialogue and then patch that in. There's a lot of tricks, but yeah, you do what you can. The thing is that typically, especially like if I'm working on a line of dialogue or a word of dialogue, and I've after like you've heard it like the 30th time or the 40th time, it's like you can convince yourself that it sounds good, or you can also convince yourself that it sounds like crap when it really doesn't. Right. So a lot of times I'll run it by a couple of people who have no idea what I've been working on. Yeah. And if they look at me and they're like, whoa, that kind of sounded weird, I'm like, okay, I didn't do it right. But a lot of times if I play it to them and I'm like, so what'd you think? Oh yeah, it sounded great. I'm like, okay, and then I'll run it by a few other people, and everybody kind of passes off on it. I'm like, okay, I got away with it. You know what I mean? So it's just one of those things where, and usually running it by people that don't do sound is the best thing, because unfortunately, we all mix, and when we're working, we're not thinking of the audience who has no idea what we're doing. We're thinking of like how other sound guys are going to judge our work.
Totally.
So we're like totally overcritical, like, oh my God, I wonder what they're going to think of this, and then you show it to someone that they have no idea. They just think it sounds great. So a lot of times I'll run it by people who have no idea about sound, and if they're like, oh yeah, it sounded amazing, then I'm like, okay, I got away with it. Because at the end of the day, 99.9% of your audience has no idea what sound is about. But unfortunately, when we're mixing, 99% of the people we think we're mixing for are our peers. So.
Yeah. It's really just a matter of making it work. So if you have to go back and forth between a lav and a boom, you have to do it. I'm working on a series right now that in one section I have 3 lavs, 3 mics in front of talent, and multiple booms. And 9 times out of 10, I'm going with the 3 mics in front of the talents, but sometimes they might bump it, or there might be a plosive or something like that, and then I'll jump to the lav, or whatever. Not the boom because it's too roomy. That's the only danger with going back and forth between the lav and the boom, was the boom properly placed.
Sure.
Here we go back to the whole thing about hiring someone that knows what they're doing. If that's properly placed, then there might not be as much room. If that microphone they have has enough rejection and all these things. So it just really, you got to get it done, you got to get done.
And let me just add one last thing that Rick just touched on that I always think is a great idea when you're mixing stuff. A lot of times when you're just working on a project and you're back and forth and you've been listening to it for hours, it's tough to get perspective, and sometimes your ears just get tired or your head gets tired. So a lot of times it's good to just walk away, take a break for an hour, or wait till the next day, look at it again. Sometimes you go in and you go, man, I thought that was just a pile of junk, and it sounds awesome. And other times you go, it sounded awesome last night. What happened? So sometimes it's good just to take a break and give your head a rest and revisit something a little later.
I'll add a technical tidbit. One of my favorite dialogue editors is Dave Camella, who's here on staff, who unfortunately couldn't be with us. He was taking care of something on the stage. When you have a lav and a boom, there's a time issue with when the sound is arriving. The lav is right here. The boom might be a little bit different in distance, and there's a phase issue. So you have to go in and if you're a good dialogue editor, you look at lav and boom, and you'll actually move the sound and samples so that the frequencies are in phase. And what happens is if the phase is off, or when you start to combine the lav and the boom together, it will get thin, and the bass goes away. It's because those low, if you're looking at the waveforms, are being canceled out with the lav and boom coming together. So if you listen to one and listen to the other and put them up together, and it's like, well, it sounds better, but it's thin. It's louder, but it's thin. Then you know that what you need to do next is you need to back up one of them. And this is not going to affect sync, because we're talking about samples, 1/48,000th of a second. Whereas when you get into frames, if you're at 24 frames a second, you're at about 2,000 samples per frame. So if you move it 5 to 10 samples, you're going to get it in phase, and it's going to remain in sync, and you'll have more options where you can just kind of get out of there and get back. But you really can do that, or effectively do that, if they're not phase aligned together. So I think that's it for questions. I want to say thank you guys for just hanging with us as we talk about sound. Before we go, and it's so perfect that Rick thought about this, as the theme is "Don't skimp on your soundtrack," and he wants to help launch that with you with an offer.
Yes. All right, everybody, get out your phones. And I'm going to need your help on this, because I was supposed to announce this yesterday to my other panels and I forgot. So please help me spread the word on this. I prefer if you guys don't blast this all over social media, but word of mouth on campus is great. But to help you guys get started, my company, Blast Wave Effects, we're going to give you guys each 1,000 sound effects downloadable on our website. It's only going to be available for the next week or so, so make sure you download it as soon as possible. I handpicked each one of these 1,000 sounds. It took me a couple of weeks. I just kind of picked away at it, but I was like, what is going to be the most 1,000 useful sounds for, film students? And so hopefully, I hope you guys dig them. Here's where you go. You go to my website, blastwaveeffects.com. Blastwave, W-A-V-E, the letter F, the letter X.com. Blastwaveeffects.com/Full Sail. And if you can't spell Full Sail correctly, you're going to fail. Go there, download your down pack. There's some other goodies there for you. You guys can check that stuff out. But please help me spread the word, because I was supposed to announce it yesterday and I failed. So tell all of your friends, because I want everybody on campus to be able to take advantage of it. So go ahead and knock your guys' selves out. If you guys have any questions in the future, feel free to reach out to me on social media and just let me know you're from Full Sail. I always answer everybody's emails, but I make sure that Full Sail students get priority when I respond. So absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
All right.